Good afternoon. We called a press conference today to announce the findings of the wreck investigation. I will say that this has been a tedious investigation, one that's out of the norm, something we haven't done here before, and that led to some research and bringing in experts that we felt would be the best qualified to give us the true meaning of the cause of the wreck. To my right, I've got Dr. Charles Manning, AR/AI out of Raleigh. And to my left, Gary Wolf. What we're going to do is have them come up and essentially tell you what their role has been. The rail investigation has been largely Mr. Wolf's. He works or is owner of Rail Sciences. They're stationed in Georgia. We brought him in initially to start the initial evaluation, which consisted of track inspection, the train inspection, areas that are within his expertise, and after his initial consultation, we asked Dr. Manning to come in and help with the mechanical aspect of what we were looking at. I'm going to ask Mr. Wolf to come up and essentially give you a brief notation about what the findings are as far as the rail. We also need to note that a full mechanical inspection had to be completed on the train for us to come to this investigation, so he's going to go over portions of that with you now.
Thank you, Mr. Clevenger. The bottom line on this train accident was a result of train overspeed. The train was likely doing about 20 miles per hour. In the curve where it derailed, the instructions for the train driver in the manual say should not exceed about 8 miles per hour in a curve. So we were significantly over the safe speed for this train to derail. To reach that conclusion, though, as Mr. Clevenger said, we did a very detailed examination of all possible causative agents in this accident. We looked at the track bed, the geometry of the track, the gauge of the track, the strength of the track, the integrity of the fastenings, and essentially found there was nothing wrong with the track bed in the curve where the train derailed. Then we turned our attention to the equipment, and we looked at all the wheels, the axles, the bearings, the springs, the truck frames, the locomotives, etc., and we could find no defects mechanically or otherwise with any of the equipment that would be a causative issue in this accident. Then we performed a series of detailed vehicle dynamic train simulations using very sophisticated computer modeling to assess the turnover speed of this train in this particular curve, and we reached the conclusion that the train would have to be going about 20 miles per hour. I should say also that the initial evidence at the site indicated a train turnover, not a typical derailment where a wheel climbs or the track bed fails or an axle fails, but this was clearly an overspeed by the position of the equipment, how it derailed, the marks that it left on the rail bed when it did derail, and therefore we knew speed was a factor pretty early on in this investigation. We just didn't know the quantitative number that it turned out to be. So doing my modeling and simulation, I determined that around 20 miles an hour plus or minus a mile an hour or so is where these rail cars would derail. And then other people, Dr. Manning, I'll let him speak about how he determined what the actual true train speed was at the time of the accident. So that's just the summary of what we found. No mechanical issues, no track issues. Principally, operator error was a single causative agent in this accident. So, Dr. Manning?
What we did, we went back down there, and with the engine tipped over, we looked at the trucks underneath it. We found that we could actuate all the brakes on the 8 wheels except one, and the air. This is a vacuum brake system and also a vacuum system on the throttle. One was crimped, and that wouldn't operate, but 7 of the 8 wheels would operate. We put the engine back on the track, and we backed it up into the corner, and I ran the train with the throttle wide open for 1/4 of a turn, and I got to about 15, 16 miles an hour. And when I put the brakes on, brakes operated even with the damaged line to the wheel. Very good. Stopped within just a very short distance. We pulled a drag factor on there of about 0.4 Gs, which is good. We then went ahead and looked at the rest of the undercarriages, and we found that cars 1, 2, and 3, we'd actuated all the brake cylinders by hand, and they would operate. But there were a lot of them in which the copper tubing had been bent and squeezed and damaged, and that was happened in the accident. That didn't happen before the accident. The brake pads still were very good. So before the accident, there wasn't any doubt if you put the brakes on, that train would have stopped in a very short distance. And we went ahead and we measured from different distances from one pole to the next on the fence, from one tree to the next. And when we did that, we found one of the people on the train had a video. And we could take that video, and as it went by a tree, we would mark, and when it got to the next tree, or when it went by a post and went by the next post, we could look at the number of frames that it went by. It was shooting 32 frames a second, would go by 1 or 2 frames. That allows us to calculate the speed. As the train went around 3 times, the first time, speed was low. The second time, it started to speed up. The third time, we calculated the speed over here past the grandstand between the 2 gates at 16.1 miles an hour. There's a little bit of a downgrade here. By the time, and this is a 105-degree radius curve right in here. At the end of down the middle, it was doing up to 19.3 miles an hour, and as it came over here to the point of derailment, it hit 22.3. That's where it went off. And you notice what happens over here. The radius of the curve is only 89 feet, which means it's a tighter turn. And it made it around this turn over here, even down at the bottom there at close to 20 miles an hour, but as soon as it hit this tight turn, it couldn't. And what happened, like Gary said, it didn't derail, it just rolled off the track because you could see the paint. He has pictures of the paint on the ties, on the outside. It was clear that we didn't find anything mechanically wrong with it. We didn't find anything wrong with the brakes. We didn't find anything wrong with the throttle. It operated much like a car. You had a brake and a throttle. You put it forward and it speeded up. Put the brake on, you let go of the throttle, it would start to slow down. Put the brake on, it would stop very quickly. And we concluded, like Gary did, there was no question. There wasn't anything wrong with the track. There wasn't anything wrong with the train. There wasn't anything wrong with the brakes. There wasn't anything wrong with the throttle. The only problem was the operator. Too fast. That was the complete cause of the accident, just too fast. 4 conditions. Thank you.
Essentially, that's the findings of the wreck investigation. We'll take questions. The information be forwarded to the solicitor, and they'll make a determination on whether or not criminal charges are justified.
Moving forward, based on the information that we received from Mr. Clevenger, County Council will have conversations about the train and hopefully receive input from the community on the operation of the train in the future as well.
Never had a derailment like this in my career. I've been doing this 30-some years. Never with a miniature train. These are very safe trains if you obey, speed limits. And like any vehicle, if you go too fast, accident can happen. But I've never had an accident like this in a miniature train operation anywhere in the country. I've had some streetcars and things like that, but nothing quite like this.
That's in 30 years. I haven't seen one in 60 years.
All right, I'm going to invite Mr. Horton to say a few words before we conclude.
On behalf of Spartanburg County Council, I would like to recognize the fact that the families involved in the accident at Cleveland Park on March 19th have exhibited considerable patience during a time of personal suffering. We know that today's report brings closure to the investigation, and while it may provide answers to some questions as to why this tragic accident occurred, we are also keenly aware that this does not bring full closure.
As far as the outcome, you know, it was kind of what we expected. From seeing the video and from talking with the other people that were on the train that we were friends with, it was kind of just, you know, they confirmed what we thought we already knew.
We're satisfied. I am. I don't know about you. It was exceptional.
If you were on the train, you knew what the cause was.
The investigators were very good. The experts were exceptional in the way they brought everything out. Really confirmed things that we felt from the beginning. So we're very pleased with that.
They did a good job. I appreciate it.
Does that help any with the healing process for you guys?
It's hard to say.
Not really.
It doesn't bring Benji back.
Yeah, it's not. We just and we look forward to the people that need to be held responsible being held responsible for it, and moving on and helping these families and talking about things that need to be done to protect the families and need to be done to make sure this doesn't happen again. You know, that's my goal, is prevention from this point.
Benji named?
Yeah, Benji named.
Yeah.
3 weeks ago. This is Hannah. This is Hannah.